Welcome back everyone to the third installment of Let's Talk About Sex. Once again, this is Isaac, and today we're not just talking about sex and pornography, but asking why we actually use it. I'm joined by Jane here, and let him answer the question for this episode. Jane?
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Thank you, Isaac. It's nice to be here. So, yes, I would like to talk about what is it that porn actually does for us and why we have built entire social spheres and industries around it. But first, I would like to ask you, what do you think porn is exactly?
Well, if you'd ask me, I understand porn as any image, video, or audio that depicts sexual behavior or nudity, and its purpose is to induce sexual arousal. In the viewer, that's what I understand it as.
Well, I'm certain that's a definition most of our audiences can agree with, but it's something that I would like to interrogate further. For example, is any depiction of sex considered pornography? If that's the case, then sections of the Bible can be considered part of this category. You have Lot and his daughters after they left Sodom, or Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38, or even the Song of Solomon, which most biblical scholars consider erotic poetry. Now, one possible objection you may have is that porn is a graphical medium. You actually have to see a visual representation of sexual acts for it to be considered porn. But even setting aside the fact that this excludes erotic fiction, such as 50 Shades of Grey, A Court of Thorn and Roses, and much of the fanfiction genre, I would say that the line is still blurry. Many critically and well-respected films, such as Fight Club, Brokeback Mountain, and Wolf of Wall Street, contain sex scenes with nudity, but they aren't commonly placed in the category of pornography. Again, you may object to the fact that these movies only capture simulated sexual acts, avoiding any depictions of genitals. My response is that there are also films like Short Bus and Nymphomaniac that depict actual penetration, but are still considered artistic endeavors. And regardless, this restriction also eliminates the entire concept of softcore porn, found in places such as Playboy magazine. What I'm trying to establish is that there are no definite bounds to the category of media that we call pornography. While it can be frustrating, I think it gives us a lot of freedom not only in terms of what roles pornography plays in people's lives, but also the potential forms it can take in the future. But I'll touch on that later. So setting aside semantics, let's put our focus back towards the reasons behind pornography consumption. Several surveys have been done exploring the motivations behind why people use it. Sexual pleasure, boredom avoidance, and stress reduction were found to be linked with one's frequency of pornography use, while emotional distraction or suppression and fantasy were motivations that were uniquely associated in problematic porn use. Another research article found that among gender-diverse individuals, a prevalent motivation to view porn was self-exploration, helping this demographic explore this facet of their identity. Now, some of the things I've listed are either mostly harmless or are actually beneficial to the individual. But you may have noticed me use the term problematic porn use. In cases where consumption becomes a compulsion, research has been able to link pornography use with detrimental psycho-emotional effects. Because porn has allowed people immediate access to novel sexual stimuli, brain imaging research has found effects on the brain akin to the influence of addictive substances. Additionally, excessive use has also been shown to be a predictor of worse depression and anxiety, especially for porn viewers who are experiencing loneliness or use it as a means of alleviating negative feelings or other such emotions that are hard to deal with. Now, in your previous episode, I believe your guest discussed the stigma and secrecy when it comes to porn in the Philippines. Seeing as how that could potentially contribute to factors such as social isolation, our viewers may be asking if it's wise to avoid porn altogether. Well, I would like to give a nuanced no to that question. Like with a lot of pleasurable experiences, moderation should play an important role with your relationship with porn. I think of it similarly to sugary or fatty foods. Excessive consumption, or using it as an emotional crutch, can harm your health in the long term. However, it is also possible to swing too much in the other direction, where strict avoidance can negatively impact you as well. It's best to be mindful of how these things fit into your life, and if their presence or absence is something that helps or hurts. A useful question to ask yourself is, am I watching this because I genuinely want to, or because I'm trying to escape something I'd rather not deal with? That distinction matters more than any fixed rule about frequency. The problem in those cases isn't really that pornography itself, it's the underlying discomfort that never gets addressed. If you're consistently reaching for it to outrun loneliness or anxiety or depression, the porn is more of a symptom than a cause. That's true of many habits we don't immediately recognize as problematic. And crucially, it's a distinction that's very hard to make honestly when the topic itself carries so much social stigma, which is part of why these conversations matter.
Actually, I want to build off that analogy you just made. With the excessive amounts of sugar and fatty foods available in the modern world, a global obesity epidemic has emerged, leading to a public health crisis. With the accessibility provided by the rise of the internet, do you think that pornography poses a similar threat to society?
Empirically speaking, the research has had trouble pinning down any significant effects at the macroscopic scale. Looking at your lineup of guests, I believe that they will be able to delve into the science and statistics better than I can. But in terms of actual tangible harms or benefits to society, it's hard to place pornography in either box. Now, is there nothing to worry about? I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case. Although the scientific investigation into pornography is a bit of a mixed bag, there are interesting perspectives to explore in terms of cultural critique and political views. To start, a point often mentioned by those who are against pornography is that the porn industry has historically contributed to the sexual objectification of women in society. When it comes down to who the medium predominantly caters to, the answer is undeniably heterosexual men. When adults in the US were asked if they consumed porn in the last month alone, the percentages for those who said yes were 91.5% for men and 60.2% for women. On the production side, women comprised 75% of performers, but only 22.4% of producers. Porn is being produced by men for men, with women having only their body and not their perspective to contribute. For feminists Andrea Dworkin and Catherine MacKinnon, pornography can be described as the graphic, sexual, explicit subordination of women through pictures or word. Then there's also the issue of sexual violence. In a study analyzing heterosexual porn scenes containing acts of physical aggression, women were the target of aggression in 97% of scenes, and men were the perpetrators of aggression against women 76% of the time. When this behavior is normalized to this extent, and when it isn't accompanied by information on how to safely integrate such acts into one's sex life, a person's perceptions towards women and sex can be heavily warped when watching porn. These acts are rarely framed as harmful within the content itself. The responses depicted are almost always ones of pleasure or indifference rather than distress, which effectively teaches the viewer that this is a normal or even desirable dynamic. For younger viewers especially, who may be encountering porn before they may have any real-world sexual experience to compare it to, this can quietly shape expectations in ways that are generally difficult to unlearn later. While these problems are important to consider, for other groups in the feminist sphere, there has been the push to also acknowledge sexuality as part of the human experience, and that pornography is an important part of expressing and engaging with one's own sexual desires. For those who are pro-pornography, the issue lies not with the concept, but the content. And this goes back to what I said near the start about the potential directions we can take pornography. For the sex-positive feminist movement, pornography can be a space for sexual agency and representation when ethical standards are prioritized. And this has led to the development of feminist porn, a type of porn that need not follow the same formula of male domination and female objectification. It can display how previously marginalized groups of people experience sexual pleasure, and it can champion the empowerment and agency of all parties in sexual acts and interactions. And with the rise of independent creators and platforms, performers and producers are given greater capability in generating a form of pornography that goes beyond sexual gratification and allows the viewer to take part in social progress. This is part of a growing conversation around what it means to be an ethical consumer of pornography. Choosing to support creators who set their own terms rather than defaulting to opaque free aggregator sites is increasingly being framed as a meaningful and personal political choice. For those suffering from porn addiction, perhaps being mindful with the type of content one consumes can help alleviate some of the negative effects of their condition. If there's one thing I do want viewers to take away from this episode, it is that there's no need to feel guilt from having sexual desire, and it's okay to act on it even if it's just for leisure. As I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with porn when consumed in a healthy manner. I also want to acknowledge that for many people watching, the cultural and religious context described in the previous episode may have made this topic feel inherently shameful. That shame can itself become a barrier to having an honest relationship with your own sexuality. You don't have to resolve every tension today, but being willing to ask these questions openly is already a meaningful step. Porn can be exploitative, addictive, and harmful when consumed mindlessly or produced unethically. But it can also be a fulfilling source of pleasure, self-discovery, and even empowerment under the right conditions.
Well, thank you, John, for everything you've shared on this episode of Let's Talk About Sex. For our next discussion, Maxine will be explaining the nature of addiction and the mechanisms behind it. That's all for now, and thank you for watching.
Let's talk about sex, baby.